There is something every chosen one carries, a memory they have never quite been able to explain. It is not something that happened to you. It is something you felt with a clarity that did not match your age. A certainty that came from no adult, no book, no conversation. It came from within, and it was so sharp, so real that you kept it quiet, because you knew no one would understand. You were what, 6, 7 years old? Maybe younger. And even so, there was something in you that observed the world with a strangeness that went far beyond a child's curiosity. Something that saw, something that felt, something that knew. And for a while you tried to bury it, because the world around you had no room for that kind of thing. School did not. Family did not. Adult conversation did not. And so you learned to pretend you were normal. You learned to hide that strange part of yourself inside a locked room and went on living as if it did not exist. But it always did, and it is here now. If you made it to this video, it was not by accident. It never is. The part of you that brought you here is the same part the world spent years trying to make you forget. There are 9 strange childhood memories that appear almost without exception in the story of every chosen one. Not as coincidence, as a mark. The 5th and the 8th are the ones that carry the most weight because they are the hardest to acknowledge, and the 9th is the one almost no one admits to, but that every chosen one carries. And if you recognize yourself in them, pay attention, because what seemed like strangeness is in truth evidence. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel. It helps me bring you more valuable content. The first memory is the feeling that you came from somewhere else, not another country, not another family, another place, a place you could not name, but that you felt with a longing that made no sense for a child. As if part of you was always just passing through here. As if the physical world was real, but not entirely yours. Do you remember looking up at the sky when you were little and feeling something? Not admiration, not curiosity. Something closer to recognition. A familiarity with whatever lay on the other side of that vast blue expanse. Most children look up and see clouds. You looked up and felt like you were looking at home. That is not childhood fantasy. That is the spirit remembering where it came from. That is the soul still carrying the impression of the sacred, before the weight of the world buried that memory under responsibilities, under pain, under the noise of everyday life. The chosen are born with a thinner veil, and sometimes as children they can still feel what is on the other side. The second memory is being different and knowing it before anyone told you. It was not arrogance. It was a quiet, almost solitary observation. You looked at the other kids and felt like you were watching from a place slightly apart. The games were fine, the company was fine, but there was always a layer of glass between you and everyone else. You participated, but never completely. You were there, but always with part of yourself somewhere else. And the hardest part was not feeling different. The hardest part was not understanding why. You were not better than the other children. You did not think you were. You just felt like you operated in a different way, as if the manual everyone else seemed to have in their heads was one nobody had given you, as if everyone was born knowing an unwritten social rule you were constantly trying to figure out while they already had it down. That has a name in psychology. But before the name there is a spiritual truth. You were built for a frequency the common system cannot reach. The sense of not fitting in was not a defect. It was a calibration gap. It was the sign that you were not made to fit that mold because that mold was never your destiny. I want to pause for a moment. There is something that needs to be said before we go on. You have carried these signs your whole life without ever having anyone put all the pieces together into a single name. That carries a weight that time does not dissolve. That ache of knowing there is something in you and never receiving confirmation that it is real is what brought you here. If something in you recognizes itself as you hear this, do not dismiss it. It is your origin confirming what has been written in you since before you had a name in this world. The Origin Codex reveals the 12 marks that were sealed in you before birth, the 12 marks no one around you ever managed to name. It is the path prepared for the chosen ones who are ready to look at what they have always known on the inside. Along with the Codex, you receive 7 sacred companions, 5 guides that decode the deepest marks you carry, from the child who felt too much to the frequency the world called a flaw, from the memory of the place you came from to the signs that appeared without explanation, plus the complete audiobook of the Codex and an audio activation sequence for each mark you carry. The link is in the pinned comment, but it will only be available for a short time. The third memory is feeling other people's emotions as if they were your own. You would be in a room and someone was sad, and you would feel that sadness in your own chest before anyone said a word. You would come home after a day with people and need silence, not because you were tired of thinking, but because you were exhausted from feeling. Every emotion around you left a mark on you. Every tension, every joy, every anguish, it all came in. As a child, that was confusing. You could not tell what was yours and what you had absorbed from others. You cried without knowing why. You felt heavy without having lived anything that could account for that weight. And when adults asked what was wrong, you could not answer because the pain had no story of your own to tell. It was someone else's pain living inside you. People called it being too sensitive. They said you needed to grow a thicker skin. They said the world was not going to wait for you if you kept feeling everything so deeply. But they did not understand. That sensitivity was not fragility. It was reception. It was the ability to pick up what lay beneath the surface of things, what people were not saying, what was hidden, what was slowly simmering before it finally boiled over. The chosen feel things first. That is part of the equipment, not part of the problem. The fourth memory is having questions that adults could not answer. Not difficult questions in an academic sense. Questions about life, about what things meant, about why people did what they did when they knew it was wrong, about what happened after death, about whether God was real, about whether there was a plan for all of it, or whether it was just chaos with a little luck scattered here and there. You asked, and adults either changed the subject or gave you rehearsed answers you could feel were nowhere near the truth. Answers from someone who had stopped asking a long time ago. And you were left there with the question still vibrating inside you, with no place to land. Over time you learned to stop asking, not because the questions had been answered, but because it became clear that the world around you was not equipped for them. And then came a specific kind of loneliness, the loneliness of someone who thinks on a frequency that finds no echo, the loneliness of someone who sees beyond what is easy to see and has no one to share the weight of that perspective with. But those questions were not a problem to be solved. They were a calling, taking shape. They were the sign that there was in you a thirst for truth that could not be satisfied by shallow answers, because you were made for a depth the ordinary world does not offer. The fifth memory is knowing things you should not have known, not in a dramatic way, not in a frightening way. It was something subtle, an intuition that arrived before logic. You knew that person was not being honest before you had any proof. You sensed something was about to change before any outward sign confirmed it. You came home one day and knew before the door opened that something had happened, and most of the time you were right, but you learned quickly that you could not say so, because when you did, adults became uncomfortable. Some laughed, some turned serious, in a way that did not feel good, and so you tucked that knowing away too. Put it in the same locked room where all your strangeness lived and pretended you did not know. But you did. That knowing has a name in spiritual language: discernment. It is the ability to perceive what is hidden, what lies beneath words, appearances, and intentions. It is one of the rarest and most misunderstood gifts that exists. And almost always those who carry it learn as children to conceal it, because the world fears what it cannot explain. If this resonates with you, do not minimize it. That knowing was not your imagination. It was real, and it is still in you, waiting to be called by its true name. And there are more memories, more pieces, and every one of them points to the same place. The sixth memory is having an imaginary friend who felt too real to be imagination. Not a lonely child's fantasy. It was a presence, something you felt nearby, in moments of fear, in moments of silence, in moments when the world around you seemed too big and you too small for it. A companionship that needed no words, one that arrived before you asked. Adults called it a rich imagination, and maybe part of it was, but there was something there that was more solid than invention, a sense that you were not alone in a way that went beyond anything any child could conjure in their own mind. The chosen rarely walk entirely unaccompanied. Heaven does not abandon them, especially when they are still small, and the weight of the world has not yet fully covered the open channel between them and the sacred. That presence you felt was not a product of your mind. It was heaven's answer to a soul that needed to know it was seen. You were seen, from the very beginning. The seventh memory is a strange relationship with time, not in a practical sense. It was not that you were always late or forgot things. It was something deeper. It was the feeling that time did not work for you the same way it worked for everyone else. Sometimes you would get absorbed in something, a thought, a landscape, a feeling, and when you came back, hours had passed like minutes, and other times a single moment stretched in a way that seemed to hold far more than the clock recorded. You had childhood memories with a strange sharpness, colors, smells, the exact texture of a surface, the light on a specific afternoon, while most people can barely remember what they did last week. And at the same time, there were entire stretches of time that seemed to have passed in the blink of an eye, as if you had moved through them somewhere else. The ancient soul carries a different relationship with time, because it has already lived a great deal in prayer, in contemplation, in layers of experience that do not fit into a single biography. Linear time was never completely your language. You always operated in something closer to eternity than to a calendar. What seemed like distraction or strangeness was actually the mark of someone who was formed in a dimension where time is not a straight line. The eighth memory is the loneliness that did not go away even when you were surrounded by people. You had friends, maybe many. You knew how to laugh, how to be present, how to take part. But there was always, somewhere deep in your chest, a loneliness that did not depend on company to exist. A loneliness that stayed with you even at parties, even in good conversations, even in moments when everything seemed to be fine. And you never understood where it came from. Because on the outside you were not alone. But on the inside, in that deeper place where you truly lived, there was a silence that no one fully reached. Did you ever wonder if something was wrong with you? Whether you were simply incapable of genuinely connecting? Whether that gap between you and everyone else was your fault? It was not. The chosen carry a calibration loneliness. It is the distance between the frequency you emit and the frequency of your surroundings. It is not emptiness, it is space. The same space the prophet needed in the desert. The same silence that precedes every real revelation. You were not broken for feeling that gap. You were being preserved for something that the constant noise of company would have kept from growing inside you. The loneliness was the soil, not the punishment. The ninth memory is having felt at least once that you had a mission, not in those exact words. You were a child, you did not think in terms of mission, vocation, or purpose, but there was a feeling, a quiet knowing, a certainty that appeared in the simplest moments, looking out the car window, lying on the floor before falling asleep, in an instant of silence in the middle of an ordinary day. That there was a reason you were here, a specific reason, not a generic one, not the reason anyone would have, your reason. And then life happened, and that certainty got buried under layers of doubt, pain, disappointment, and years that passed without the reason becoming any clearer. And you gradually learned not to trust that voice, learned to call it illusion, pride, the fantasy of a child who did not understand how the world works. But it never truly went away. It is here now, in this video, in this moment, David was a shepherd when the prophet came to him. He was not yet a king, far from it. He was the youngest son, the one no one thought worthy of attention. But there was a mark on him that no human eye could see, one that God had already written before any man knew his name. The Anointed One does not need the world's recognition to be what he already is. You do not need permission. You do not need proof. What you felt at that car window, on that floor before sleep, in that moment of silence, it was real. It was the calling confirming its own presence inside you. The mission was not canceled. It was simply being waited on by you. And now that you have seen the 9 memories, something may be happening inside you in this moment. Maybe a relief you did not expect. Maybe an emotion that arrived without warning. Maybe that old feeling of being finally seen, showing up in a way you did not know you still needed. Let that feeling be. It is legitimate. It carries years of waiting behind it. But there is a question worth asking now, not to unsettle you, but to invite you into something more real. Of these 9 memories, which one stopped you the most? Not the most dramatic, not the one that seems most spiritual, the one that hit closest, the one that made you pause for a second and think, how did you know that? Because it was something you had never said out loud, something that lived in a place you thought only you knew. It is important that you know the name of that place, because it is exactly there at that specific point where the memory hurts, and at the same time makes sense that your mark is most alive. It is there that the calling is closest to the surface, and it is there that most chosen ones stop looking, precisely because it is the place that frightens them the most. You have spent your entire life interpreting those memories as evidence that something was wrong with you, that you were too sensitive, too different, too loneliness, too strange, that the misfit was your fault, that the questions were an overreaction, that the knowing you kept quiet was arrogance or delusion. What if it was the opposite? What if each one of those memories was in fact a faithful record of who you have always been before the world tried to convince you to be something else? What if the strangeness was not the problem but the clue? What if everything you have hidden since childhood was exactly what heaven placed in you on purpose, not despite your story but through it? The child who felt other people's emotions was not miscalibrated. She was being formed to feel what others refused to see, to one day be the presence someone else desperately needed and could not find anywhere. The child who knew things he should not have known was not making things up. He was learning to trust a perception the world would not validate, so that one day he could use that discernment at the moment it was most needed. The child who felt like she came from another place was not escaping reality. She was keeping alive the memory of the sacred, so as not to lose the thread connecting her to what is eternal, even when everything around her seemed temporary and heavy. You were not chosen despite those memories. You were marked through them. If something in you recognized itself in this video, do not dismiss your origin. The link in the first comment is there whenever you are ready to look deeper. The Origin Codex is the path prepared for the chosen ones who are ready to look at what they have always known on the inside. The 9 memories you just recognized do not exist in isolation. They form a map, and like every map, it is only useful to those who are willing to walk it. Now, one simple thing before you go. In the comments below, write which of the 9 memories touched you the most, and if you want, share briefly what you felt. It does not have to be long. It does not have to be perfect. It can be a sentence. It can be a single word. But write it, because something happens when you take what has been stored inside and put it into words after years of silence. Something shifts, something releases, and sometimes that is exactly what the next step was waiting for. You are not commenting on a screen. You are marking a moment. The moment you stopped treating your own story as strangeness and began reading it for what it has always been, confirmation. You made it here. That was not an accident. This is your place. It always was. Before this world had a name for you, you were already marked. Walk in that knowing.